Marcus wiped the grease from his hands as he watched the sleek black sedan pull into the empty parking lot beside the highway rest stop. Steam poured from under the hood like a signal flare against the darkening sky. He had stopped here himself just minutes ago, his own battered pickup truck parked nearby, while his 8-year-old son Jamie slept in the back seat, exhausted from another long day of job hunting that had led nowhere. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The woman who stepped out of the disabled car looked nothing like someone who belonged in this forgotten corner of Route 47. Her navy blazer was pristine, her heels clicked against the asphalt with the confidence of boardroom meetings and corner offices. But as she lifted the hood and stared helplessly at the maze of hoses and belts beneath, Marcus saw something familiar in her expression. The same lost look he had been wearing for months. She pulled out her phone, held it high, then lowered it with a frustrated sigh. No signal, no rescue coming. Just her, the dying light, and an engine that had chosen the worst possible moment to surrender. What she did next would change everything for both of them, though neither could have imagined it in that moment. 6 months earlier, Marcus Chen had been living a different life entirely. Senior software engineer at Meridian Technologies, respected by his colleagues, earning enough to provide comfortably for Jamie after his wife Sarah had passed from cancer 2 years prior. The morning they called him into the conference room, he thought it was about the promotion he had been promised. Instead, it was about budget cuts and restructuring and all the corporate language that meant the same thing. His position was being eliminated. 23 other employees were let go that same day, but Marcus felt the weight of it differently. He was a single father with a mortgage and a son who still asked why mommy never came home. The severance package was decent, but in the tech industry, decent meant 3 months of breathing room before the real panic set in. Jamie had taken the news better than expected. At 8, he possessed the kind of resilience that children summon when they sense their world shifting. He simply asked if they would still live in their house and if he could still go to Lincoln Elementary with his friends. Marcus had promised yes to both, though privately he wondered how long he could keep those promises. The job search had been brutal. Marcus discovered that being a 42-year-old programmer meant competing with fresh graduates who worked for half his salary and coded in languages he was still learning. Interview after interview ended with polite rejections and suggestions to consider positions below his experience level. His savings dwindled. The mortgage payments became a monthly crisis. Still, he kept searching, kept hoping, kept pretending for Jamie's sake that everything would work out, which brought him to this moment, parked at a rest stop after another failed interview in the next state over. The hiring manager had been younger than his laptop and spoke about synergy and disruption, while Marcus tried to explain why 20 years of experience should matter more than the ability to work 16-hour days for startup equity. The woman beside the steaming sedan was looking around now, clearly hoping someone might appear to help. The rest stop was nearly deserted. A trucker dozed in his cab 50 yards away. An elderly couple sat at a picnic table sharing sandwiches. No mechanics, no tow trucks, no salvation in sight. Marcus glanced back at Jamie, still sleeping peacefully, his face pressed against the window. The boy had been so patient during all of this, never complaining when dinner became peanut butter sandwiches or when their weekend plans shifted from movies and restaurants to free activities at the park. He deserved better than a father who spent every day getting rejected by people half his age. But he also deserved a father who helped people when he could. Marcus got out of his truck quietly, careful not to wake Jamie, and approached the stranded woman. She looked up as he neared, her expression cautious but hopeful. "Car trouble?" he asked, which felt ridiculous given the obvious circumstances. "The temperature gauge just shot up into the red zone," she said, gesturing helplessly at the dashboard. "I pulled over as soon as I could, but now it won't start at all." Marcus nodded and peered under the hood. The smell of coolant was unmistakable, and he could see the problem immediately. A radiator hose had split, dumping fluid all over the engine compartment. It was a relatively simple fix if you had the right parts, but not something that could wait. "Blown radiator hose," he told her. "You're lucky it happened here instead of on the highway. Could have caused serious engine damage." The woman's face fell. "How serious is serious?" "Well, The good news is this is fixable. The bad news is you're not driving anywhere tonight without a replacement hose. He pulled out his phone to check the time. Most auto parts stores will be closed by now. She closed her eyes and took a deep breath. When she opened them again, Marcus saw something he recognized from his own mirror recently. The look of someone trying not to fall apart. "I have a presentation tomorrow morning," she said quietly. "The biggest deal my company has worked on in years. If I miss it..." She didn't finish the sentence, but Marcus understood. He had given his own share of critical presentations, had felt that particular pressure of knowing that everything depended on being in the right place at the right time. "Where are you trying to get to?" he asked. "Downtown, the Grandview Hotel. It's about 40 minutes from here, assuming traffic cooperates." She looked at her disabled car with something approaching despair. "I should call a cab, but my phone has no signal." Marcus looked around the empty rest stop, then at his own truck. Jamie was still asleep, and they had nowhere urgent to be. Their apartment waited for them, along with another evening of job applications and rejection letters. But this woman had somewhere important to be, something that mattered riding on her getting there. "I could give you a ride," he offered. "I'm not a serial killer or anything, though I suppose that's exactly what a serial killer would say." She almost smiled at that. Almost. "That's incredibly kind, but I couldn't impose on a stranger like that." "No imposition. My son and I were heading back into the city anyway." This was only partially true, but close enough. "I can drop you at your hotel, then come back tomorrow with a replacement hose if you want. Fix this up for you." Now she did smile, though it was cautious. "You would do that? For someone you've never met?" Marcus shrugged. "My wife used to say that kindness was just love in work clothes. She was better at both than I am, but I'm trying to learn." Something in his tone must have conveyed the truth of it, because the woman's expression softened. She extended her hand formally. "I'm Victoria. Marcus. And that's my son Jamie in the truck. Fair warning, he might wake up and ask you approximately 700 questions about everything." Victoria gathered her briefcase and overnight bag from the backseat of her car, locked it carefully, and followed Marcus to his pickup. As they approached, Jamie stirred and sat up, rubbing his eyes. "Dad? What's happening?" "We're giving a nice lady a ride to her hotel," Marcus explained as he helped Victoria into the front passenger seat. Her car broke down. Jamie perked up immediately, any trace of sleepiness vanishing. "What kind of car? What's wrong with it? Are you gonna fix it?" "Dad's really good at fixing things. He fixed our toaster, and our shower, and the wobbly table in the kitchen." Victoria turned to look at Jamie, and Marcus caught something unexpected in her expression. Not irritation at being peppered with questions by an 8-year-old, but something gentler, something almost wistful. "It's a very nice car," she told Jamie seriously. "But sometimes, even nice cars." Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now, back to the story. Get tired and need help. "Like people," Jamie observed with the wisdom that children sometimes possess. "Dad says people get tired too sometimes, and that's okay." Marcus felt heat rise in his cheeks. He had said that during one of their conversations about why Daddy seemed sad lately. He hadn't realized Jamie was paying such close attention. As they drove toward the city, Victoria and Jamie fell into an easy conversation. She asked about school, his favorite subjects, what he wanted to be when he grew up. Jamie told her about his teacher, Mrs. Rodriguez, and his best friend, Tyler, and his elaborate plans to become either a dinosaur scientist or a race car driver, depending on which seemed more exciting by the time he finished college. "Those are both excellent career choices," Victoria said solemnly. "Very different skill sets, but equally important. Dad says I have time to decide. He says sometimes the best jobs are the ones you never thought of when you were little." Marcus glanced in the rearview mirror and saw Jamie swinging his legs contentedly. His son had always been social, but there was something particularly animated about him tonight. Maybe it was the novelty of meeting someone new, or maybe he sensed something that Marcus was still figuring out. "What about you?" Jamie asked Victoria. "What's your job?" "I run a company," Victoria said simply. "We make software that helps other companies work better." "Like apps and stuff?" "Exactly like apps and stuff." Marcus nearly swerved. He had assumed she was in sales or marketing, someone important enough to warrant the hotel in the urgent presentation, but not necessarily someone who would understand the technical side of his background. The possibility that she might be in tech herself added an unexpected layer to an already surreal evening. They were entering the city proper now, downtown lights beginning to twinkle in the distance. Marcus realized he didn't want this drive to end. Not because of Victoria necessarily, though she was undeniably intriguing. It was more about Jamie's laughter and the easy conversation and the feeling that for the first time in months, they were part of something beyond their small circle of worry and diminishing hope. "The grand view is just ahead," Victoria said, pointing to a gleaming hotel that probably charged more per night than Marcus had budgeted for groceries this month. He pulled into the circular drive and helped her retrieve her bags from the truck bed. Jamie had grown quiet, sensing that their adventure was coming to an end. "Thank you," Victoria said, and Marcus could tell she meant it. "Really, you saved my entire week." "Happy to help. I'll come back tomorrow morning with that hose, get your car running again." She hesitated, then pulled a business card from her purse. "My cell number is on here. Call me when you're heading out, and I'll meet you at the rest stop." Marcus took the card without looking at it, slipping it into his shirt pocket. "Will do." Victoria leaned down to wave at Jamie through the window. "It was very nice meeting you, Jamie. Good luck with the dinosaur science." "Good luck with your app stuff," Jamie replied cheerfully. As they drove away, Jamie was unusually quiet for several minutes. Finally, he spoke up. "Dad?" "Yeah, buddy?" "I liked her. She seemed very nice." "Are we going to see her again?" Marcus thought about the business card in his pocket and the broken-down sedan waiting at the rest stop. "Tomorrow, when we fix her car." "Good," Jamie said with satisfaction. "I want to ask her more about the apps." That night, after Jamie was asleep, Marcus finally looked at the business card Victoria had given him. The logo was familiar, though it took him a moment to place it. When he did, his blood turned to ice water. Victoria Santos, Chief Executive Officer, Meridian Technologies. The same Meridian Technologies that had laid him off 6 months ago. The same company where he had spent 7 years building his reputation and his career. The same organization that had decided his experience was worth less than their bottom line. Marcus sat at his kitchen table staring at the card until the letters blurred. Of all the people who could have broken down on that empty stretch of highway, it had to be her, the woman who had signed off on his termination, who had personally approved the decision that had turned his life upside down. He should be angry. He should be furious. But all he felt was a strange kind of numbness, as if the universe had played a joke so elaborate that he couldn't quite process the punchline. Tomorrow, he would drive back to that rest stop with a $20 radiator hose and face the woman who had cost him his job. He would fix her car and send her on her way, and she would never know that the stranger who helped her was one of the people she had personally destroyed, unless he told her. Marcus turned the business card over in his fingers, weighing possibilities he hadn't considered before. He could confront her, demand explanations, make her understand what her decisions had cost real people with real families. He could refuse to help, leave her stranded as poetic justice for stranding him in unemployment. Or he could simply fix her car and walk away, taking whatever small satisfaction came from being the better person. He was still deciding when he finally went to bed, the business card lying on his nightstand like a question mark waiting for an answer. The next morning dawned gray and drizzling, matching Marcus's mood perfectly. Jamie was excited about returning to help with the car repair, chattering over breakfast about alternators and spark plugs with the enthusiasm of someone who had absorbed automotive knowledge through osmosis. "Can I help you fix it, Dad? I promise I'll be careful." "We'll see, buddy. Depends on what needs to be done." Marcus had stopped at the auto parts store first thing, purchasing not just the radiator hose but also fresh coolant and a few other items that might be useful. The total came to $37, money he couldn't really afford to spend but couldn't afford not to spend either. Some things were more important than the bottom line. The drive back to the rest stop felt longer than it had the night before. Marcus found himself rehearsing conversations, imagining how Victoria might react when he told her who he was. Would she remember his name? Would she feel guilt or justify the decision as necessary business? Would she offer him his job back, and if she did, would he even want it? Jamie seemed to sense his father's tension. "Are you nervous about fixing the car?" "A little," Marcus admitted. "Sometimes fixing things is more complicated than it looks." "But you're really good at fixing things." "Some things are easier to fix than others." Victoria's sedan was exactly where they had left it, looking forlorn in the morning drizzle. Marcus parked nearby and gathered his tools while Jamie bounced impatiently in his seat. "There she is!" Jamie pointed to a figure approaching from the direction of the hotel. Victoria had traded her business attire for jeans and a sweater, looking more approachable but no less professional. She smiled as she reached them, though Marcus thought he detected traces of the stress she was undoubtedly feeling about her presentation. "Right on time," she said. "I was starting to worry you might have changed your mind." "A promise is a promise," Marcus replied, surprised by how normal his voice sounded. "Let's see what we're dealing with." The repair itself was straightforward. Marcus had done this kind of work before, back in college when he couldn't afford to pay mechanics for every minor issue. He explained each step to Jamie, who watched with rapt attention and asked the kind of questions that showed he was actually listening. Victoria watched too, and Marcus found himself conscious of her presence in a way that had nothing to do with who she was, and everything to do with the way she paid attention. She didn't hover or offer unhelpful suggestions. She simply observed, occasionally asking questions that demonstrated genuine interest in understanding the process. "Where did you learn to do this?" she asked as Marcus tightened the clamps on the new hose. "Necessity, mostly. When you're a broke college student, you either learn to fix your own car, or you walk everywhere." "What did you study?" The question was casual, conversational, but Marcus felt the weight of it. This was where the pretense would have to end, where the comfortable fiction of stranger helping stranger would collapse into the complicated reality of who they actually were. "Computer science," he said, focusing intently on the radiator cap. "Software engineering, specifically." "Really? That's my field, too. Are you working in tech now?" Marcus straightened slowly, wiping his hands on a rag. Jamie was crouched beside the front tire, examining the lug nuts with scientific precision. This was the moment. This was where everything changed. "Not currently," he said carefully. "I was laid off about 6 months ago. Still looking for the right opportunity." Victoria's expression shifted slightly, becoming more focused. "I'm sorry to hear that. The job market has been challenging lately. What kind of work were you doing?" "Back-end development, mostly. Database optimization, system architecture. I was with the same company for 7 years, before the budget cuts hit." Something was happening in Victoria's face now, a gradual recognition that made Marcus's stomach clench. She was putting pieces together, connecting dots that led to an uncomfortable conclusion. "What company?" she asked quietly. Marcus met her eyes directly. "Meridian Technologies." The silence that followed stretched like a taut wire. Victoria's face went through several expressions in rapid succession. Surprise, confusion, understanding, and finally something that might have been horror. "Marcus Chen," she said, and it wasn't a question. "You remember?" "I remember." Her voice was barely above a whisper. "Senior engineer, team lead for the financial services division. Excellent performance reviews, no disciplinary issues." She paused. "You had a son." "I have a son," Marcus corrected, glancing toward Jamie. "He's right here." Victoria followed his gaze, and Marcus saw her face crumple slightly as the full implications hit her. This wasn't just about an employee she had been forced to let go. This was about a family. A real person with real consequences stemming from her decisions. "Oh God," she breathed. "Marcus, It's okay," he said quickly, though he wasn't sure it was. "You didn't know." "That doesn't make it okay." She was staring at Jamie now, who was completely absorbed in his tire inspection. "How long have you been unemployed?" 6 months. 2 weeks. 3 days. "But who's counting?" The attempt at levity fell flat. Victoria looked like she might be sick. "I need you to know," she said urgently. "That decision, those layoffs, they were the hardest thing I've ever had to do as a CEO. We tried everything else first. Pay cuts for the executive team, elimination of bonuses, restructuring debt. But the investors were threatening to pull funding entirely if we didn't reduce headcount immediately." Marcus nodded. He had heard variations of this explanation before, though never from the person who had actually made the decision. "I looked at every file personally," Victoria continued. Tried to find ways to keep the people with families, the long-term employees. But the numbers were the numbers. We had to cut 24 positions or lose the entire company. I understand, Marcus said, and realized he meant it. I don't like it, and it nearly destroyed my life, but I understand. How can you be so calm about this? Victoria asked. If someone had done to me what I did to you, I would be furious. Marcus considered this as he started putting his tools away. I was furious. For about 3 months, I was angrier than I've ever been in my life. Angry at you, at the company, at the whole system that treats people like line items on a spreadsheet. What changed? He looked at Jamie again, who had moved on to examining the brake calipers with intense concentration. My son asked me why I was always mad. And I realized that being angry wasn't going to get me a new job or put food on the table. It was just making us both miserable. Victoria was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice was thick with emotion. I don't deserve your kindness, any of it. The ride last night, fixing my car today. You should have left me stranded. Maybe, Marcus agreed, but that's not who I want to be. And it's not who I want Jamie to see me as. All done, Dad? Jamie announced, bouncing to his feet. Can we start it up now? Marcus looked at Victoria, who nodded. He turned the key, and the engine started immediately, purring smoothly with no sign of the previous night's distress. Perfect, he said, closing the hood. Good as new. Victoria stood staring at the car as if it were an alien artifact. How much do I owe you? For the parts, your time, everything. Nothing, Marcus said firmly. Just helping out a neighbor. Marcus, please, let me pay you something. Let me do something. He was about to refuse again when an idea occurred to him. Not for himself, but for the other 23 people who had been laid off alongside him. Actually, he said slowly, there is something you could do. Victoria straightened eagerly. Anything. Some of the people who were let go are still looking for work. Good people, experienced developers and analysts and project managers. If Meridian's financial situation has improved, if you're hiring again, we are, Victoria said immediately. Business has picked up significantly in the last quarter. We've been authorized to bring back some of the positions that were eliminated. Then maybe you could take another look at some of those files. Give people a chance to come back if they want to. Victoria nodded vigorously. Absolutely. I'll start making calls this afternoon. And Marcus, if you're interested, your position is yours. No interview, no probationary period. Just come back. Marcus felt Jamie's eyes on him, wide with excitement at the possibility of stability returning to their lives. The offer was everything he had hoped for during 6 months of fruitless searching. Good salary, familiar environment, the chance to stop worrying about the mortgage and grocery bills. But something held him back. Can I think about it? He asked. Victoria looked surprised. Of course. Take all the time you need. But can I ask why you're hesitating? Marcus wasn't entirely sure himself. 6 months ago, I would have said yes without thinking. But a lot has changed since then. I've changed. I'm not sure I want to go back to who I was before. What do you mean? He gestured around the rest stop, at the simple act of helping someone in need. Before, I was so focused on climbing the corporate ladder that I forgot why I got into programming in the first place. I wanted to build things that mattered, solve problems that helped people. Somewhere along the way, it became just about the paycheck and the title. Victoria studied his face carefully. What would you want to do instead? I don't know yet. Maybe freelance consulting. Work with smaller companies that are trying to solve real problems. Maybe teach, pass on what I've learned to the next generation. Maybe something I haven't thought of yet. Dad, Jamie interrupted, tugging on Marcus's sleeve. Are we going to see Victoria again? Marcus looked down at his son, then at Victoria, who was watching them both with an expression he couldn't quite read. I hope so, buddy, he said. I think we'd like that. Victoria smiled, and for the first time since she had recognized his name, it reached her eyes. I'd like that too. They exchanged contact information, real contact information this time, not just emergency numbers. Victoria hugged Jamie goodbye. which he accepted with the easy affection of a child who had decided someone was worth trusting. As they drove away, Marcus caught sight of Victoria in his rearview mirror, standing beside her now functional car and watching them disappear down the highway. "Dad," Jamie said after they had been driving for several minutes. "Yeah?" "I think fixing her car was the right thing to do, even though she was the one who made Daddy lose his job." Jamie considered this with the seriousness he applied to all important questions, especially because of that. Marcus glanced at his son in amazement, 8 years old and already wiser than most adults. 3 weeks later, Marcus accepted a position with a small startup that was developing educational software for children with learning disabilities. The salary was less than what Meridian had offered, but the work felt meaningful in a way that writing financial algorithms never had. Victoria had followed through on her promise to contact the other laid-off employees. 14 of them had chosen to return to Meridian. The remaining 9, like Marcus, had found different paths forward. She had also started a small fund to help employees who were laid off in the future, providing career counseling and financial assistance during the transition period. It wasn't much, but it was a start. On a Saturday afternoon in November, Marcus and Jamie were at the park when they spotted a familiar figure on a nearby bench. Victoria was alone, reading a book and occasionally glancing up to watch the children playing. Jamie spotted her first and took off running before Marcus could stop him. "Victoria! Victoria!" She looked up, startled, then broke into a genuine smile as Jamie launched himself at her for a hug. "Well, hello there, Jamie. How's the dinosaur science coming along?" "Great! I checked out 3 books from the library about velociraptors. Did you know they had feathers?" "I did not know that. That's fascinating." Marcus approached more slowly, hands in his pockets. "Sorry, he saw you and took off like a rocket." "Don't apologize. It's the best surprise I've had all week." Victoria closed her book and patted the bench beside her. "Sit, please." Marcus sat, maintaining a careful distance. Their relationship had evolved into something neither of them quite knew how to define. Not friendship exactly, but more than the polite acquaintance of former employer and employee. "How's the new job?" Victoria asked. "Good. Really good. We're working on an app that helps kids with dyslexia learn to read. It's not going to make anyone rich, but it might actually change some lives." "That sounds perfect for you." Jamie had wandered over to the playground but stayed within sight, occasionally waving to make sure they were still watching. "What about you?" Marcus asked. "How are things at Meridian?" Victoria was quiet for a moment. "Different. Better, I think. I've been trying to run the company more like a family and less like a machine. It's harder to measure in quarterly reports, but the culture feels healthier." "That's good." "Marcus," Victoria said suddenly, turning to face him directly, "I need to tell you something." The seriousness in her voice made him nervous. "Okay." "That night when my car broke down, when you stopped to help me, it wasn't the first time I'd seen you." Marcus frowned. "What do you mean?" "I was at the coffee shop across from Lincoln Elementary 2 weeks earlier. I was having lunch with a client, and I saw you picking up Jamie from school. You were laughing at something he said, and he was holding your hand and practically bouncing with excitement about his day." Marcus remembered that afternoon. Jamie had gotten an A on his spelling test and wanted to celebrate with ice cream. "I recognized you immediately," Victoria continued. "It hit me like a physical blow, seeing you there with your son, looking happy despite everything my decision had cost you. I wanted to approach you, to apologize, but I couldn't bring myself to do it." "Why are you telling me this now?" "Because I need you to know that when I saw you at that rest stop, when you offered to help, despite having every reason to hate me, it changed something fundamental in how I see the world. You showed me what grace looks like." Marcus didn't know what to say to that. Jamie was climbing the monkey bars now, his face scrunched in concentration. "There's something else," Victoria said. "The reason I was on that highway in the first place. I was coming back from a meeting with investors about expanding the company. If the deal had gone through, we would have needed to hire 50 new employees immediately." "That's great news." "I turned it down." Marcus looked at her sharply. "Why?" because the growth model they wanted required exactly the same kind of cost-cutting measures that led to the layoffs. They wanted us to build a company that could be easily dismantled if profits dropped. I realized I didn't want to build that kind of company anymore. Victoria, I know it sounds naive. Maybe it is naive, but I'd rather run a smaller company that treats people well than a larger one that treats them as disposable. They sat in comfortable silence for several minutes, watching Jamie navigate the playground equipment with fearless determination. "Would you like to have dinner sometime?" Victoria asked suddenly. "You and Jamie, I mean. I make a pretty decent lasagna, and I have a feeling Jamie would enjoy hearing more about software development." Marcus smiled. "I think we'd like that." "Good, because there's something else I want to talk to you about. A project I'm considering that might interest you." "What kind of project?" Victoria's eyes lit up with the kind of enthusiasm Marcus remembered from his early days in tech, when building something new felt like changing the world. "Educational software," she said. "Specifically, tools to help children from low-income families access the same quality of learning resources as their more affluent peers. I've been researching it for months, and I think there's a real opportunity to make a difference." Marcus felt something stir in his chest, a familiar excitement he hadn't experienced in years. "Tell me more," he said. As Victoria outlined her vision, Jamie finished his playground exploration and came running back, cheeks flushed with exertion and pure joy. "Dad! Victoria! Did you see me on the monkey bars? I made it all the way across without falling." "We saw," Marcus said, pulling his son close. "We're very proud of you." Jamie beamed, then looked between the two adults with the calculating expression he wore when he was working out a puzzle. "Are you friends now?" he asked. Marcus looked at Victoria, who was smiling at Jamie with genuine warmth. "I think we might be," he said. "Good," Jamie declared with satisfaction. "I was hoping you would be." 6 months later, Marcus stood in the offices of Santos Educational Solutions, watching his team of developers put the finishing touches on their first product launch. The app they had built would provide free tutoring support to children in underserved communities, connecting them with volunteer educators through an interface designed specifically for young learners. Victoria appeared beside him, holding 2 cups of coffee. "Nervous?" "Terrified," Marcus admitted. "But good, terrified. The best kind." Jamie was at his after-school program, but he would be there for the launch party later. He had become something of a mascot for the company, testing every feature with the brutal honesty that only an 8-year-old could provide. "You know," Victoria said, watching their small team work with focused intensity, "I never thanked you properly." "For what?" "For showing me that the best way to fix something broken isn't always to replace it entirely. Sometimes you just need the right person with the right tools and the willingness to get their hands dirty." Marcus thought about that night at the rest stop, about the choice he had made to help a stranger instead of driving past, about all the choices that had led them to this moment. "I think," he said, "we fixed each other." Victoria smiled. "I think you're right." The launch was a success. The app was downloaded 50,000 times in the first week, with glowing reviews from parents and educators. Local news picked up the story, framing it as a feel-good tale of local business giving back to the community. But for Marcus, the real success was simpler and more personal. It was Jamie racing around the office after the launch party, high-fiving everyone and explaining to anyone who would listen that his dad had built an app that helped kids learn better. It was Victoria watching Jamie with the kind of soft expression that suggested she was imagining what it might be like to have a family of her own. It was the realization that sometimes the worst thing that could happen to you was actually the first step toward the best thing that could happen to you. Late that night, after Jamie had fallen asleep clutching a tablet loaded with the educational games they had developed, Marcus stood on his apartment balcony looking out at the city lights. His phone buzzed with a text from Victoria. "Thank you for taking a chance on a broken-down stranger," he typed back. "Thank you for being worth the risk." Almost immediately, his phone rang. "I have an idea," Victoria said without preamble. "It's midnight. The best ideas come at midnight. What if we expanded beyond just tutoring? What if we created a whole platform for educational equity? Reading programs, math support, coding classes for kids who might never otherwise have access to that kind of training. Marcus found himself smiling. That's a big idea. The biggest. Too big for one company, probably. We'd need partners, funding, a team 10 times the size of what we have now. Are you asking me if I think it's possible? I'm asking if you want to try. Marcus looked through the sliding door at his sleeping son, then back at the city spread out below them. Somewhere out there were thousands of children who deserved the same opportunities Jamie had, who needed someone to believe they were worth investing in. Yeah, he said. I want to try. Good. Because I already have 3 meetings set up for next week with potential investors. Victoria? Yes? Don't ever change. Her laugh was warm and full of possibility. Not a chance. 2 years later, the Santos Chen Educational Foundation had launched programs in 12 states and helped over 100,000 children access quality educational resources. Marcus had been featured on the cover of Tech Innovator magazine as one of the industry's rising social entrepreneurs. Victoria had been nominated for a humanitarian award from the National Education Association. But the moment Marcus treasured most was a simple Tuesday afternoon when Jamie, now 10 and showing signs of his father's analytical mind, looked up from his homework and said, "Dad, I'm glad Victoria's car broke down that day." "Why's that, buddy?" "Because now we have her forever." Marcus ruffled his son's hair, thinking about the strange paths that led people to where they belonged. "Yeah," he agreed, "now we have her forever." Outside, rain began to fall gently against the windows, the same kind of soft drizzle that had marked the morning Marcus first fixed Victoria's car. But inside their warm apartment, with homework spread across the kitchen table and the quiet hum of a life rebuilt from kindness, everything felt exactly as it should be. Sometimes the universe conspires in the most unexpected ways, turning roadside breakdowns into beautiful beginnings and proving that grace often arrives disguised as ordinary Tuesday afternoons. 5 years had passed since that rainy night at the rest stop, and the Santos Chen Educational Foundation had become something neither Marcus nor Victoria could have imagined in their wildest dreams. What started as a simple tutoring app had evolved into a comprehensive ecosystem of educational support that reached children in 43 states and 6 countries. The foundation's headquarters occupied 3 floors of a renovated warehouse in the Arts District, its walls covered with thank you letters from students, photos from graduation ceremonies, and artwork created by children whose lives had been touched by their programs. But for all the accolades and recognition, Marcus still found the most meaning in the quiet moments when individual stories emerged from the data. Like Maria Santos, a 12-year-old from rural Arizona whose parents worked double shifts at a meat processing plant. She had discovered coding through one of their mobile learning labs and was now building her own educational games for younger children. Or David Kim, whose learning disability had made traditional schooling a struggle until he connected with one of their specialized tutors and discovered a passion for environmental science that led to early admission to college. Jamie, now 13 and towering over his father despite his age, had become an unofficial ambassador for the foundation. He spoke at fundraising events with the easy confidence of someone who had grown up understanding that his comfort came from helping others find theirs. His presentations always included the same core message, that sometimes the best things in life started with someone being brave enough to help a stranger. Victoria had changed too, though the transformation was more subtle. The sharp-edged businesswoman who had once measured success purely in quarterly profits now spoke fluently about social impact metrics and community engagement. She kept a photo on her desk from the foundation's 3rd anniversary celebration, showing her and Marcus and Jamie covered in paint after helping a group of 8-year-olds create a mural about their dreams for the future. Their relationship had evolved slowly, carefully, like 2 people who understood that the best foundations were built one careful brick at a time. They had been dating officially for 2 years now, though their partnership in the foundation had made them inseparable long before either was ready to admit their feelings extended beyond professional collaboration. The proposal, when it finally came, was perfectly them. Marcus had been debugging code for their new literacy program while Victoria reviewed grant applications at the kitchen table. Jamie was at a sleepover, and the apartment was unusually quiet. Victoria looked up from her papers to find Marcus watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read. "What?" she asked, suddenly self-conscious. "I was just thinking about that night when your car broke down," he said. "About how scared you were of missing your presentation. I was terrified. I thought my entire career was over. And I was angry at the world and convinced that helping anyone was pointless because no one had bothered to help me." Victoria set down her grant application. "Where are you going with this?" Marcus reached into his desk drawer and pulled out a small velvet box. "I'm going with the fact that we were both wrong. Your career wasn't over, it was just changing direction. And helping people isn't pointless, especially when you find the right person to help them with." Victoria's breath caught as he opened the box to reveal a simple platinum band with a small diamond that caught the light from their work lamps. "Victoria Santos," he said, moving to kneel beside her chair, "will you marry me and spend the rest of your life arguing about educational policy and debugging code, and showing our kids that the world is full of strangers worth helping?" She said yes before he finished the question, tears streaming down her face as she pulled him up for a kiss that tasted like coffee and possibility, and the kind of happiness that builds slowly over time. Jamie's reaction when they told him the next morning was pure 13-year-old pragmatism. "Finally," he said, not looking up from his cereal. "I was starting to think you two were never going to figure it out." "You're okay with this?" Marcus asked, suddenly nervous about disrupting the careful balance they had maintained for so long. Jamie looked at him with the patient expression he had inherited from his mother and perfected through years of dealing with adults who overthought everything. "Dad, she's been part of our family since I was 8. This just makes it official." The wedding was small, held in the Foundation's community garden where they had planted their first learning lab 5 years earlier. Jamie walked Victoria down the aisle, grinning broadly in his first real suit. Marcus's best man was David Kim, the former student who is now finishing his environmental science degree and working part-time for the Foundation as a program coordinator. Victoria's maid of honor was Maria Santos, the coding prodigy who had just started high school and was already taking college-level computer science courses online. She had flown in from Arizona specifically for the ceremony, her parents beaming with pride as they watched their daughter participate in the wedding of the people who had changed her life's trajectory. The ceremony was officiated by Mrs. Rodriguez, Jamie's former elementary school teacher, who had become a close family friend and board member of the Foundation. She spoke about the ripple effects of kindness, about how a single act of grace could spread outward in ways impossible to predict or measure. "Marcus could have driven past that broken-down car," she said, looking out at the small gathering of family and friends. "Victoria could have called a different cab company. Jamie could have stayed asleep in the back seat. But they didn't. They chose connection over convenience, community over comfort. And because of those choices, thousands of children now have access to educational opportunities they never would have had otherwise." The reception was held in the Foundation's main conference room, decorated with paper flowers made by students from their art therapy program. Instead of a traditional cake, they served cupcakes baked by children from their culinary arts initiative, each one decorated with frosting messages of congratulations in 6 different languages. As the evening wound down and guests began to leave, Marcus found himself standing on the Foundation's rooftop garden, looking out at the city lights and thinking about the strange mathematics of serendipity. How many small decisions had aligned to bring them to this moment? What if he had been 5 minutes later leaving the job interview that day? What if Victoria had chosen a different route home? What if Jamie hadn't been tired enough to sleep through the initial car trouble? Victoria joined him on the rooftop, still wearing her wedding dress but having traded her heels for the comfortable flats she kept in her office for long days of walking between classrooms. "Regrets?" she asked, slipping her hand into his. "Only one," Marcus said. "I wish Sarah could have been here to see this. She would have loved you. I wish I could have met her. I have a feeling we would have been friends. The best of friends." She had the same stubborn optimism you do, the same belief that broken things could be fixed if you just found the right approach. They stood in comfortable silence, watching the city pulse with life below them. Somewhere out there, children were doing homework with the help of tutors they had connected with through the Foundation's platform. Others were attending coding camps, funded by their scholarship program. Still others were reading books donated through their literacy initiative, discovering new worlds and possibilities they might never have encountered otherwise. "Do you think we'll ever really know how many lives we've changed?" Victoria asked. Marcus squeezed her hand. "I don't think that's the point. I think the point is that we keep trying, keep building, keep helping whoever crosses our path. Even when they're strangers with broken-down cars? Especially then." As they headed back inside to rejoin their wedding celebration, Marcus caught sight of Jamie through the conference room windows. He was showing a group of younger kids how to fold origami cranes, his patience infinite, as he guided their small fingers through each precise fold. Watching his son teach others with the same gentle encouragement that had defined their family's approach to everything, Marcus felt a deep satisfaction that had nothing to do with professional success or financial security. This was what legacy looked like, he realized. Not monuments or achievements, but the quiet passing of kindness from one generation to the next, creating ripples that would spread far beyond anything they could imagine or control. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.